Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Center of Influence on Feed Your Brand, and I have a really cool guest for you today. You are going to love her. Jessica Kupferman is the co-host and co-founder of ShePodcasts brand, which I hope you've heard of by now because they have been stirring things up for quite some time. And they have a great new event that we're going to talk about today, ShePodcasts Live, and it is coming up in October. There's going to be links to that all throughout the blog post for this post. And we're super excited to talk to her because she has over 12,000 female podcasters and a digital marketing reach of 50,000 content creators. The ShePodcast community was funded spring of 2019 via Kickstarter. Double the goal, which I love because as you guys may have heard from me in the past, Kickstarter is not a place to raise products and interest in products for women. Like, just doesn't normally work. So they broke the mold there, and I love that. They sold 200 tickets in 30 days. I think you've sold way more by now, so Jessica and I are going to talk about that. But she specializes in marketing and monetizing within the podcast industry, and that is something we so badly need to talk about here, because in order to become the center of influence, and it's great to be an influencer, but if it's not making you money at the end of the day, what's it worth? So Jessica's been featured in magazines such as Entrepreneur, Forbes, Social Media Examiner, Yahoo Finance. She's been guest on Entrepreneur on Fire, Faster Than Normal, The New Media Show, and she's spoken at the NAB Show, Blog Her, Social Media Marketing World, Podcast Movement, and many more. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So you have how many speakers on the ShePodcast docket right now?
106. And
106 women.
I know. And we had 185 people apply, including some men. And I won't lie, it gave me a little bit of delight to tell them no. Not that they weren't qualified, because of course they were, but if there's a man that can talk to it, there's definitely a woman that can talk to it. And I just didn't want to, as good as they are speakers, the point is to give women a chance who maybe have never had a chance before. So,
well, let's step back a little bit. When did you decide to podcast?
I decided to podcast in 2013. I started a show called Lady Business Radio. And actually the reason I started it was because I wanted the publicity myself. And I looked at all the other entrepreneurial podcasts, and it was Entrepreneur on Fire, Smart Passive Income, School of Greatness, Mixology. They were all white men interviewing other white men, save Pat Flynn, who's like white-ish, but obviously he's not white. But
yeah.
No, they were all interviewing white dudes, which I understand, because when you start an interview show, you end up interviewing people who you want to emanate. And of course, men want to emanate men because they're men. So it made sense to me, but I felt like, well, where the hell are all the women's? Why are there no women's shows? And then I thought, you know what? I'll make the women's show. I'll be the one to amplify these voices, because clearly no one else has thought of it. And then there were a couple that came right after me, Biz Women Rock and Biz Chicks, which are still going now. I stopped Lady Business Radio to have a baby. And after 200 shows, I had a really hard time going back to it, because it started to become a bit of the same conversation. Well, first of all, I change what I'm doing like every 3 years. So like there's that. But also it started to become a very similar conversation over and over. And I also, as I was out of on maternity, I saw that, Lady Business Radio and that community was stagnant. It hadn't really grown without me. But ShePodcasts, on the other hand, had like tripled in 4 months. Like the women who were wanting to start a podcast, like it had grown enormously in my absence. And it was not a very large amount of time. So I was like, maybe I should focus my time here, because clearly this is a group that needs, support. So Yeah, but so I started my first podcast because of that. And then when we started ShePodcasts, Elsie asked me to also do a podcast about it. I started the women's group just so that for the same reason I started a show, because I needed mentors that were women to give me answers about how to say no to interviewees or how to, add time into my schedule. That, I needed mentors that had spouses and children. Felt like they didn't understand what I was saying when I was just like, no, I can't do 3 shows a week though. Like I don't have the time, and I don't
My
have
kids are going to be screaming in the background.
I mean, I already had a cat that was screaming in the back, like I was already just doing it the way I was doing it, and doubling your shows just isn't the right way to the answer to how to grow your audience. You don't just say double your shows. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of answers I got,
It's really interesting because, I have a network here that has over 225 podcasters. And Tom asked me the question the other day, who's our top women in the group? And you know what? It was really hard to identify because I have some that have amazing shows, really, really great, but they're so inconsistent with what they put out.
See, that's right.
And I was like, what? And so it started me thinking really about having this conversation with you. What can we do differently to support them? Because the men their shows are not better.
No.
They're not better. So why isn't it working, and what's not happening there? And, it's also an interesting thing is when I did what I did here, which is I put out a call to all of your speakers, or most of your speakers. Mm-hmm. I couldn't physically fit them all in. Like I wish I could. So I was here's one. I haven't heard that title before. Like it was kind of, I almost threw darts at it. It was kind of that way. I was like, let's see who responds, and whoever responds, they must be the most eager, and that's wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Right? And so that's what I did. And so I've already talked to a couple of them. They're amazing, and I've absolutely loved them. But why haven't I heard about them before? Like, what's going on there?
I mean, not to blow into the microphone in frustration, but I think part of it is that there are certain podcasters that get attention over and over and over again. And like, for me, that exposure comes at podcast conferences, and I see speakers being recycled over and over again. And I know of women, like one of my speakers who has applied to be a podcast movement for 4 years, and she's never been chosen. And I saw her speak at an Outlier Festival, which is a podcast festival in Austin. And she was hilarious and amazing. And I was like, she had already applied. But I basically walked up to her after, and I was like, you're going to be a speaker because you're amazing. I can't believe you've never been chosen. It's crazy. And I think
this is the same thing for me. So like I speak all over the world at entrepreneur events, and I do keynotes.
Yeah.
I can't, they don't call me back. Like they don't. And I was like, what is with that? It's like,
what is with that?
Yeah. What is with that? Because, are you afraid? Like, I don't know. Are you afraid?
Last year we had gone on a crusade specifically with Podcast Movement to get them to increase their, amount of diverse voices. And they did pretty good in their defense. I mean, it was up to 25-30%, which is okay. But Elsie was like, and then when Elsie probably questioned them about it. And he said, we did the best we could, but there's not that many that apply. And I can actually vouch for that. Like, I know for a fact that even if I had said yes to every woman of color, I might have half. I mean, I'm at 40%, which is amazing though.
That is completely amazing, but that is why aren't they applying? And so part of it is that I stopped applying. So like, I just gave up on it. I was like, why bother? You know what? I'm not going to bother to do that anymore, because first off, all the events that I get asked to speak at, I'm asked to speak. I don't.
Yeah. And maybe paid even.
Yeah. And so I don't, yeah, exactly. I don't apply. That's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
So, so part of it is like you get beyond that. But you're right. When you put out a call, I put out a call for guests, or we put out a call for speakers, and they don't apply as often or as frequently as the men do. And why is that? And it's a fundamental, I don't think my show is good enough.
I think that women in general, I mean, part of the reason I wanted to do this conference is that I do think women in general either are afraid of being heard, afraid of putting themselves out there, afraid they'll be told they're not good enough, or just plain old don't think they are good enough. Like they wouldn't even consider applying or putting themselves up because they already assume it's too hard, it takes too much time, it's too technical, they can't do it, they don't, it's all these barriers that I think are mean, some are definitely of value, like the not enough time, the I don't know any tech. I mean, that stuff's legit. It's just that those aren't barriers that need to stop you if you want to do this. And I don't think people necessarily realize that. But I do think as far as like applying to speak, I think they just assume they won't get it. I think women,
Interesting. So you just don't want to put yourself out there for the reject, which is so interesting.
yeah. I mean, I've never
Maybe not my style. Maybe that's part of it. But I mean, I guess.
Either.
Yeah.
I'm totally comfortable with rejection on every level.
Well, and
Very familiar. Not.
Yeah, I got to speak this summer on a stage with 200 investing women in finance.
Whoa.
And I looked at this audience and I said, I'm like speechless right now, which never happens to me, but I've never gotten an opportunity to speak to this many women. So I'm really looking forward to your conference because it just dawned on me that 90% of my audiences are mostly men, and because of the industries I speak in. And so I was like, this is a trait.
Yeah.
And it's, and to be able to inspire and to push through and to get this content heard by them, that was just an honor. So I'm looking forward to your event. I can't wait to hear some of the great speakers. But let's talk a little bit more about your podcast and what you're doing, because, it affords some things that I think people don't realize. Some interesting things that may have happened to you, some invites, things that may have occurred for you, or maybe even something kind of funny that went on. Whatever it might be, I'd love to hear some stories about how it's moved you forward in your industry and in your business.
So the first show that I did, Lady Business Radio, I did that because I wanted to start a speaking career and I knew I was going to try and have a baby. And I didn't think it would be smart to start a career where I'm traveling, even locally, all the time. Like I live in Delaware, which is 20 minutes from Philly, an hour from Baltimore, 2 hours from DC. Like I have lots of speaking opportunities like within a driving distance. And I was a little bit afraid that I would get some momentum and then get pregnant and then not want to do any of it. So, I mean, I've been pregnant before and I know that it's exhausting. So I was like, I don't think it's a good idea. But so I was asked to speak on a podcast and I loved how it worked. And I thought, like I said, I'm going to be the one to start this. But I also saw it immediately as an opportunity to get to know some women that I saw as influencers and influential in a more personal way because I'm charming. And I thought that, like that being interviewed by me would be fun and then we would get to know each other and then they would like me. And it did kind of work out that way. Like there were women that I've always wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with and I never had a good excuse. I'm not like a let me pick your brain kind of chick, but I don't like that when people do that to me. So I didn't want to do that, but all of a sudden I could call or, email Mari Smith, Leonie Dawson, Pam Slim, and be like, hey, Tori Johnson, and say like, I would love to have you on my show. It's a women's entrepreneurial show and it's very relaxed and I'll probably bring up all kinds of weird stuff, but because I also did want to be a little bit of like a Howard Stern in that I like to dig for the story. There's a story with everyone, and I didn't want it to be, tell me about your journey to success. I really wanted to hear, like, Pamela Slim goes on a book tour for like 6 months out of the year. Like, does her husband approve of this? Like, do her children remember what she looks like at the end of it? Like, I wanted to know.
I'm so glad you asked those questions. Like,
yeah, it was important to me to know, and also to sort of make entrepreneurship feel a little less lonely. Because it does kind of feel lonely, don't you think?
Yeah, it does feel a little bit lonely. And there's like different questions. So I like to up my game all the time. So I know that I'm a good speaker on stage, but hey, why shouldn't I go and get trained and learn how to maybe convert into more sales or do those things? So I step up, but there's only like men to learn from. And so I go out there and I go to learn and I'm sitting back going, gosh, no one's ever talked about the jewelry we have to wear, as stupid as that sounds, or where to put the microphone when you've got a dress on, and like, what's going to happen with and how that big old bulky thing looks behind your neck. And, like no one ever talks about that. And so, and the fact that when you wear spiky heels, it scares the crap out of everybody in the audience, like seriously scares them. I've had that feedback before. And so now I only wear wedges when I'm on stage because they're so afraid you're going to fall on your nose. But I'm 5'2".
If you're in the audience and you see that stuff teetering. It's scary.
It's scary, right? Exactly. But I'm 5'2", and there's no way I'm going to go flat.
Me
So,
too.
you got to have some wedges there. So, I have my favorite pair of shoes, which I've actually picked up and shown off on a Facebook Live. It's my most popular Facebook Live I ever did. But you don't realize how important it is. So I'm so glad you're asking those questions.
Yeah. So I did that for about a year and a half. And through that, I did get a bunch of speaking gigs, and people started asking me to talk about branding and marketing, which is what I was doing. And then I also started noticing people were asking me about how to podcast. So I did a little course on that, and that went very well. And then I started being asked to speak about podcasting at entrepreneurial things like BlogHer. That's more of a blogging conference, but that worked out pretty well. And then as all that was happening, the ShePodcast group was growing and growing and growing and growing. We weren't monetizing it really very consciously because Elsie has a full-time job. She works for Libsyn, and I was doing coaching and consulting and web design. And I've sort of had to hone in on what I've wanted to do over this time period. I had an ad agency for a little while where I was helping podcasters sell ads on their show. And then I sold the agency because I couldn't only make money selling ads on big shows, and they don't really need my help. It was the smaller shows that needed help. So
yeah, it's the 98% that don't qualify for advertisements.
Yeah, that's who I really wanted to help. And I couldn't make money doing that. So I was like, what is this all for? I don't want to, it's just silly. So I sold that. And then I was in the process of trying to pick, a new project to work on. I thought maybe it would be like a sponsorship course. And I was like, wait, now is the perfect time to do an event. It's something I've always wanted to do, is plan an event and a big party and make sure everyone's having a good time and learning and feeling uplifted and encouraged. And it all has sort of led me to this path. It wasn't a path I always knew I was on, but I do remember when I started ShePodcast, I talked about doing live events because I'd just been to one of Tori Johnson's Spark and Hustle. And she had this thing where she would plan 6 events, 1 per month in different cities. And then in every city she would choose speakers based on whoever wanted to sponsor would get a booth and a speaking spot for like $3,000 to $5,000. So she made money. They made money. Tickets sold. Everybody was happy. And she got to travel the country. And I was like, she's a genius, because I had like kids really early and I've never been anywhere. So I was like, I got to figure out how to do that. So it isn't exactly working out the way that she did it, but I'm doing the first show in Atlanta, and that's really exciting. And I'm planning events, which I love to do. It's funny. I've been encouraging one of my friends who hates her job to be an event planner for like 3 years. And now I think I know why. I think it's because I'm the one that I'm like, you love this stuff. And
you were trying to live vicariously through someone else, but really you should have been doing it.
Do I? And I'm like, you do. You're great at this. But I think, yeah, it was me. I was like trying to figure out how to live vicariously, but I love doing it. So
I love that. I'm super excited about your event. So because there's some, it's got a fun vibe already.
Yeah.
Because it has this grassroots thing that happened from starting in Kickstarter. What made you guys decide to go Kickstarter? Because as I mentioned, like I've done a ton of research on it. Women's products do not succeed.
Yeah. So 5 years ago, Podcast Movement, 5 or 6 years ago, they started on Kickstarter. They went to the podcast community and said, we'd like to try this little event. Tickets were like $30, $50, or $100, or you could be like a bigger sponsor for like, my husband and I gave them $500, and I got to speak on the stage for the very first one. And it was very small. It was in Dallas for the first 3 years, but they did very well making sure that it was something the community wanted. And that's the lesson I took from it. It wasn't necessarily like, I want Podcast Movement cred, but like I wanted to make sure, even though women here and there have been asking for it for a couple of years, that they really meant it. Because in the ways I've tried to monetize ShePodcasts in the past, they tell me they want something and then I give it to them and then they don't want to pay for it. So, and that's not everything, but it's just, I wasn't willing to do that with $100,000 event. I wanted to know that they would buy tickets, that they would show up, that they would sponsor it, that they would speak at it. And I kind of wanted to guarantee, or I was just going to work on the other project I had. So I just asked for $25,000 because I felt like, that's enough of a boost to at least put a down payment on a hotel and then figure it all out the rest of the way. And instead we doubled it and we sold 200 tickets during the Kickstarter and we got $50,000. And so I had a really good sense of, okay, this is something that people want.
Yes, absolutely. And, and the more women I've told about it, the more excited they were. They were like, finally, because they've been
Yay.
sort of giving up on the other events because it didn't feel like it was for them.
Yeah, I mean,
Sad.
do you feel that way? I don't know that I necessarily feel like it's not for me. I just feel like, it's like radio. If radio is for everyone, is it really for anyone?
So
Like
I have a
radio
confession to
is
make,
better.
Jess.
Yeah.
I've never been to a podcast event.
Are you serious?
I've
No
never been
podcast
to
movement, no
no,
pod.
no Podfest, no podcast
No
movement.
podcast?
My team has, but I've
Yeah.
not. Because
So this will be your first one. Well,
when
I'm
you don't
honored.
invite me to speak, I don't come. I don't have time for that. I'm speaking somewhere else,
You're
likely.
fancy. You're
I know.
fancy
I'm a little conceited here. No, it's just that I'm usually
it.
then someplace else because you didn't book me, and so that
Right.
way I don't attend events. I don't have time for that. I try to take the extra time to attend the ones I go to. Like
Yeah.
I would never come to your event and not stay for as much of it as I could. I mean,
Yeah.
try to stay for the absolute whole thing, and in your case, I will. But it's just
Yay.
I believe that that's the commitment to an event that I make, and so because of that, and I have 3 kids, so
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I can't do too many a month. I don't do more than 2 events a month. So for me to travel all the way, if they were in my backyard, it'd be different. I'd show up for a day or 2, but when they're not in my backyard, I can't commit to attending an event.
That's very interesting.
Isn't that funny?
Well,
so you're going to be
it
my first podcast event.
Well, I will say there is something very special about being in a room full of, so like I was just at NSA, the National Speakers Association conference, and they are very different than podcasters. Both are a chatty bunch, but speakers are extremely extroverted, and I'm just going to say it, glory hogs. Like they love to be the center of attention. They want to be on stage. The bigger, the better. Podcasters are not exactly that way. They want to get their message out, but they are really passionate, sometimes a little shy, sometimes a little introverted, sometimes a little bit of, introvert, extrovert. But for the most part, like they might be a little more socially awkward. Like when I was at the speaker convention, I'm like, this is a lot of bodycon dresses and a whole lot of hairspray. Like I was impressed at like how made up and glittery everyone was, but it's so different than a podcast conference in that they are ready for action. Podcasters are like, is this okay? Am I doing it right? Like I feel like they need like I almost feel like they need like, whether it's mental or physical, like a makeover and a push out the door. Do you know what I'm saying? And that's why I want to just be like, y'all are awesome. I don't know why you don't think so or who told you otherwise, but get your bodycon dress on and get up on that stage.
I love that. No, you know
fun.
what? You're right. There's a very big difference between the speakers and the podcasters. And you know what? The thing is, though, is that what I've discovered underneath is they're both completely insecure about how they're doing.
That's interesting.
That they both are like, am I good enough? Like, who's doing better than me? Like, there's still that underlying, because when I put out a post, I just did a post in a webinar recently about the 12 things you did wrong when launching your podcast that's killing your growth.
Ooh, ouch.
And yeah, it's
Popular.
ouch. But you know what? My biggest fear is that a couple of the slides have pictures of like what you did wrong on your cover art. Like those people are going to show up and be all upset. Like they're going to accidentally show up on my thing. I'm like, sorry, I've been sharing your photos, your cover art for about 3 years now.
I find that most people know their cover art's messed up.
They do.
Because they did it by themselves in a hurry just to get it out there because they were being told, just get it out there, get it out there. And then actually I did that. My cover art was horrible for 2 months, 3 months, and I couldn't get it. I fixed it eventually because I didn't realize it was inverted in Apple Podcasts. It was like black was white and what was kind of scary and creepy. But like, yeah, I fixed it. I made it so that it was a little more appealing. I mean,
but yeah, those are the kind of things, like they show up for that, then they don't say anything though. They won't say anything until like behind the scenes. The only offer that I ever make is let us evaluate your show for you and let's tell you where you are, because we have other shows so we can see where you're fitting in. And so then they'll take you up on that, but they're like, but they don't want anyone to know they're on there. Like it's the funniest thing.
Yeah.
They're worried, they're competitive too.
One thing I've noticed at podcast, this is something, first of all, I love podcasters. They're definitely my people. And I am an outgoing introvert. So I do fit in, but like sometimes I hear like if I'm sitting somewhere with like somebody else well-known, podcasters is the only place I've been since high school where people will come up and be like, can I sit at the cool kids table? And I'm like, that does not exist here. you just sit down. Like that is it is the silliest concept to me that as an adult we're like, oh, this is the cool kids table. And I'm like, don't ever say that about me. That I don't like that. I don't want to think like that. I don't think like that. But I know that that's like am I good enough to sit here?
Yeah.
And I just think that's so cute, kind of. And like, I mean, I think it makes them generous, supportive, inclusive. That's all the things that I love about this group. And especially women, it makes them even more like, as long as we all respect each other, you can be anything from anywhere, and we include you and we support you and we encourage you. I love that about this group. So I'm excited to have them all in one place.
Yes, me too. So let's talk about some nitty gritty stuff. So
Yes.
How has podcasting really moved your authority, gotten you more stages, done more of these things? Like, how has it done that?
So what's funny is that the She Podcast group started as like 5 people, and now it's 13,000 women. And I don't know that she and I have ever really pushed people to join. I think that because it's growing on its own, it shows up in a lot of people's like, you should join this. And then I think people appreciate the vibe in there and they encourage other people to join. But for whatever reason, I was just telling this to my husband last night. I'm like, I know it's an accomplishment, like logically, but I'm not sure what I did though. Like, what did I, could I do it again? Could anyone do it? And he was like, no, I don't think anyone could do it, but it's okay if you can't. So I'm not sure, but I do know that as it's grown, my credibility has grown. It has given me the opportunity to talk about the stuff that I am good at, which by the way is not voice or tech or mics or podcasting. I don't know diddles about any of that. I can clearly grow a community. I can clearly market to a community and for a community. I definitely know how to sell advertising and I know how to sell and I know how to market and I know how to make stuff look fun and funny. That's my forte. And because of podcasting and because of this group, I've been invited to talk about the things that I am actually good at, which does apply to podcasting, but technically it applies to anything. Like if you have a show, if you have a blog, I can look at your stuff and say, you're not bragging about yourself enough here, or you're saying too many words and nobody knows what the hell you're talking about here. Like I can see where the sales messages are going awry and fix that. And I've had an opportunity to teach that, which I'm very grateful for. So I know that I have a lot of credibility and influence in the podcasting industry. I know people know me a lot because I'm the founder of this group. But when people say I'm a podcasting guru, I do still cringe a little bit.
Oh, don't you cringe?
Don't ask me about mics and stuff. Like, I don't know what mic's the best. I have no idea what my mixer is set on right now. Like, I don't know.
So I do know that, and I wish people wouldn't ask me about it because it's not the point. Like that's
no, it's not always the point, but but like I want them to ask Elsie's my partner and she knows all that stuff and she's really into that stuff. I've edited my own show, but I didn't know what the hell I was like. I was just like, there's an I'll just take it out, but I didn't know how to mix it, or I'm a video person and I don't know why, but it seems so different. Video, because you can clearly see when it's too green or too purple, but audio, I don't know what to listen for, so I don't know when it's right or wrong. So I just am like, well, here's where your sales message. I don't know what else to talk about, but we all have our skills, right? But I'm very grateful that people hopefully think of marketing and monetization and they think of me as someone to learn from in that area, because I do think I've helped a lot of people like get sponsors and keep sponsors and reach out to sponsors and know which sponsors to reach out to. Like I'm very good at that stuff. So
and this is something that I think people have a mistake on, is thinking about monetization of their show as only sponsors and only advertisers.
True. So
There's
true.
Tons of other ways. What other ways have you been able to monetize your She Podcast and Lady Biz? We've been
able to do so. Lady Business Radio had advertising, but that's just because it was an entrepreneurial show when there really wasn't a lot. And anybody with like a MailChimp course would ask me to put it on there. Like, will I talk about it? And I talked about it for like $50, $100, $200. So that was mostly sponsorship. She Podcast, we've done live events, live tapings of our shows. We've done an online course. We've done in-person workshops, VIP days. We now have Patreon. It doesn't make us a lot. It's like $700 something a month that we split, but it's not nothing, which is what we used to get. So for us specifically, there's been Elsie does a group coaching workshop like every, I think, spring and fall, and she's been able to monetize that very well through the group. I don't think she goes outside of ShePodcasts at all to market that. And because she wants the people that we already work with that know us to teach them more deeply one-on-one. For me, I would love to not have to, I would love to be able to just pull event resources from the group, but I know that, with Facebook groups are just hard. Like if I could find a way to pinpoint every single one of those 13,000 people, I don't think I would have to, but Facebook makes it a little like I can't. I haven't been gathering email addresses the whole time, and I probably have like a third of email addresses of the people that are in there. So I do kind of have to market outside of it a little bit. But for other podcasters, I was very clear that I wanted to do a speaking gig. I was very clear that I wanted to do live events somewhere at the beginning. And subconsciously or not, I've sort of driven my career in that way. I knew I wanted to speak. I started speaking at every podcasting. It wasn't exactly what I put out into the universe, but I've yet to be paid properly for like a speaking gig or a keynote. And I've never been a keynote. For my first keynote will probably be for my own event, but whatevs, it's a keynote and it'll be
it's a keynote, right? If you have to create your own event to do it, actually it's harder. What you're doing is harder than speaking a keynote at somebody else's event. So let me tell you what you're doing.
I think I'd be more nervous at someone else. At least I know these women like me. It's for me, it's about being liked. Like, are they going to hate me if I say something silly? But I think when a podcaster starts, if they know they want to be, like Elsie was very clear, like for speaking, when it comes to her, she just wants to be the talent. She does not want to create an event. She does not want to plan a wedding. Or, that's kind of what it's like. She wants to show up, be paid a speaking fee, and go the hell back to her room. She doesn't, that's it. And she has kind of manifested that in our relationship and us talking about it. She works the exact way she wants to work. She gets everything out of this podcast that she wants. She wanted a small group to coach. She has that. She wants show up and do the speaker. She has that. If you're a podcaster just starting and you want a membership, or you want to evoke social change, or you want to eventually teach people a course on the topic that you have a podcast on, you just make sure that at least the direction you want to go in ahead of time, and then you can kind of steer your show in that direction. But it can be monetized all kinds of different ways, like kinds of different. Yeah. And there's so many speakers that are going to show that at the event, just every which way to monetize.
Well, I look forward to that. Well, let's touch on some of our 5 things that I do with everyone here.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So
am I talking too much? You can just tell me.
No, gosh, no, that's what you're here for.
I know, but I know podcasters are wordy.
You know what? We like wordy because that's why we're brandcasters. So the wordiness benefits us at the end of the day, and that's how we drive all our traffic. So we care about the wordiness. So
right on.
It's going to be right in the blog. So so share some lessons, some experiences on the best ways to book great guests.
I think you have to do research. I think that, there was a little while there where I was picking all the people, and then they started pitching me. And at first I started just saying yes to everyone because I'm a people pleaser, and it's such a bad thing to be. And so I was getting guests that they were not good guests. They just wanted the audience and the attention, and I wasn't doing enough research. So I started really researching how have they, you don't want to be the source of someone else's audience. You want to make sure that their audience listens to the show. So, you just want it to be like this isn't date. I actually find this to be a lot like dating as well, where you don't want to be the one giving in the relation. You want it to be a give and take in the relationship. So you have to research your guests to find out, are they bringing something of value to your show? Will your listeners be grateful that you've interviewed them? So if you are being pitched, you really have to do your homework to find out how interesting are they. And even if they're fascinating, if you can't see that in their web copy, this is the salesperson in me and the marketer in me. If I couldn't tell they had a decent website or decent marketing copy, no way. Because what are they going to say in person? This is your sales tool. If you can't make that sparkly and shiny, forget it. You're not coming on.
So that sounds perfect. So you know what? Actually, though, what Jess is alluding to is actually going to be a core part of my talk that I'm going to give at the event. And it's important. It's about what you look for when you research it. Because I learned this by being a columnist. I didn't learn it from interviewing guests myself, but like you, we got burned a few times and said, this isn't going well. And lucky for me, my first podcast was in a tech industry. So it really didn't matter. Like nobody was anybody. So there wasn't a lot of that audience share thing. It was a content share. So unless it was just really bad content and they weren't interesting, and if they were that bad, we did kill the show. Like we wouldn't air it. We'd say, oh, I'm so sorry. The audio was bad. Like,
I got better at
reschedule, and we never reschedule. Like that was
same.
it. But
Same. That's subtle, but it gets the job done.
That's right. So I'll be talking about that. So you're alluding to that. So I'm
good.
glad
Good.
Because that research, I think you're right on. Doing that research is essential. And those that do it and spend that time to prep, I see better shows because of it. So good.
Yeah. So there's 20 women who will say that they now help women step into their greatness and be their authentic selves. But only one of them has slept in a van for 2 years. That's the girl I want. I want the one that's like done something crazy or gone out of the box. Like I learned to pick that out as like something I've never heard before. They always make great guests.
Awesome. I love that. So how about increasing listeners? What are some of the best ways to increase listeners?
Increasing listeners, I think, is a little bit more mathy than people like to hear. So I'm all about the math. When you're on the show, you talk about going to Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram, wherever you are. And then when you're on there, you drive people to the show. And then when you have an email and you drive people to the show and the social. So that, it's this sort of concept of being everywhere, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I do think everyone is somewhere. And like, if you have people that just use Facebook, you've got to make sure that they see that you have a new episode out. And if you have people that just listen, you have to make sure that they follow you on Facebook or Twitter so they can know when the next episode is out. You want them to come back, and they're not going to be listening to podcasts 24/7. Some psychos do, but for the most part, we have things to do, right? So we only know when a new show is.
Listeners as psychos?
No, but just, I know that people aren't just like, when's Jessica going to do another episode? That's like, I'm assuming they're on Facebook, they're looking at a feed somewhere. And if they don't see that I have a new episode, they're going to miss it. So I want to capture that every single time, which means I want to make sure that I'm posting when I have new stuff happening wherever they are. And then I want them to come, so I want to make sure they're following me on the thing that they use, and then they can see me to listen. And it's just like a constant re-bringing back of people over and over. And then that's not enough. If you only have 100 followers, you'll keep having the same 100 people, but then you have to start growing those channels, because you really cannot control listeners of podcasts. They are either going to find your show and listen or not, but you can control your community growth and how many people you follow on Facebook and how many people follow you and who you're talking to on Twitter and how many people you follow there and LinkedIn and advertising. That's all stuff that you have full control over. And I'm all about having control and being a control freak. That's my MO. So I would love to be able to tell people that, that if they don't listen to my show, bad things will happen to them, but I don't think they'd believe me. So instead, I'm just going to spend money to control what I can. And I think that's the best way. So it's like, keep sending people back to the show and the social, and then grow the social as much as you can so that you can put them in that rotating cycle. I'm using my hands like a nut job right now, but
so if you're listening, you're not seeing.
Yeah, you're not seeing my crazy circle hands, but yeah, I think if, and it used to be easier.
It
especially
fulfills, right? It does.
Yeah.
Because if they listen enough, then they come to love you, and then they come to trust you, and then they come to want more from you. And so then you get them into whatever it is that's working for you monetization wise.
I think now the growth for social is also around advertising. It used to be Twitter had these auto follow and unfollowing tools, but they don't really have those anymore. So just doing a cheap ad to try and get 1,000 people in your direction a week or a month is perfect.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that more and more paid ads for listeners.
Yeah,
it's becoming more and more common. So yeah. So now you don't like to talk tech.
I don't mind. I just don't know a lot about it.
but you do think that a show needs to be produced in a professional way. And what does that involve for you? What makes it more professional?
It used to involve nothing. And my first show was I didn't even edit it because I couldn't be bothered. I felt like I was obsessing. And so I stopped obsessing, and I was just like, whatever happens on the show, it's just going to happen. Hopefully it sounds good at the end. And then we got an editor for ShePodcasts that I guess loved the show but hated listening to it. So he was like, he tricked us. And he was like, let me just do an experiment with your audio. We'll record you some of the audio and I'll send it back. You tell me what you think. Well, I don't listen to my own show, so I have no idea the difference. But he was just like, I'd love to keep doing it for you. If you'd like just so he could listen, because he couldn't stand the way it sounded. And then, the few times I've listened since then, I was like, wow, he really is a genius. Like, it sounds great. And then I upgraded my microphone from like a Snowball, which is embarrassing, to like an ATR 2100, which is not, it's under $100, but it makes you sound really good. And then since then, I've gotten a couple gift mics from people who wanted me to review them on the show. So right now I'm using a Heil PR30, which actually enhances the tones in women's voices to be a little bit richer and deeper, which is nice. Yeah, so that's what
I count on my editors to do that part to make me sound deep and rich, but I also have a deeper voice than most women, so that works on my favor. But
yeah, it totally does. And I mean, so now I think if you're not going to take the time to understand how to edit your own show, at least like my editor will do like a one-stop shop where for an hour he'll listen to your show live with you, make adjustments, show you what to do on his screen, and then you're set. You can go edit your own show. At least have someone listen and tell you. I don't want to do it either, but I'm saying if you can't afford someone to do it for you, which you and I are very lucky, like we've had people do it for us. I mean, John was doing it for free until we could afford to pay him. Yeah. But I know that he will at least listen and be like, if you just make these adjustments, you'll be all set, and then you'll be all set. You don't have to worry, is it sound like this or that? So I think that's important, at least to know what the levels are and then just never touch them again,
Yeah, no, that's so important. So, okay, good. Yeah, because how people experience it, you should at least listen to your show once, right? And make sure that it's not bad, right?
I used to, but I found that I sound like a maniac. Like I sounded, I'm very enthusiastic, and I felt like I sounded like a psycho. And I was just
because of that.
I know, but it made me really crawl out of my skin listening to myself.
I don't listen. I have to tell you, that occurred to me the other day that I have not listened to my show in probably 3 years.
It's hard.
It is. It's really hard. I was like, I listen when we first do it, make sure it's like the quality that I want, the setups the way that I want, and then that's it. Then I let it go because I trust my team to do it, but I don't listen to it. I don't have time to listen to it. It's not even like I don't want to. I just don't have time.
I work from home. I never drive anywhere. Where am I going to listen to it? I can't listen when I'm working because I can't think listening to myself. And like, even I can just hear myself right now. Like, I can just hear myself right now thinking like, why are you talking so much? Shut up and let her talk for 5 minutes. Like I'm just critical. I can't.
It's my job to let you talk. So
it inhibits me.
I'm the host this time. I am.
I'm one of the few people. I know you're supposed to listen to yourself, and I don't do it, and I always get made fun of for it, but it inhibits me, and that's why I don't do it.
So now you guys have a great community. How do you encourage engagement in that community?
Okay, so I actually have tricks for this that I think will work in any community. As long as you remember that people love to talk about themselves. So there are 2 tricks to this. Number 1, ask for advice. You don't even have to need advice. Just ask for it. Just say, I'm buying a new mic. Which one should I get? You could have already purchased it. It doesn't matter. People will talk all day about what they think, and they besides loving to talk about themselves, they love to help. People are inherently in need of feeling smart and accepted, and helping other people is part of this. So if you ask their advice about literally anything, you will get the longest amount of comments on a post in your life. So that is number 1. Number 2 is icebreakers. I learned that if you just ask, I mean, we don't do this in ShePodcasts anymore, but sometimes just for funsies, I'll throw it in there. Like, if you were an ice cream flavor, what ice cream flavor would you be? And like, the answers don't matter, but people love to pontificate. I'm vanilla because I'm super boring, or I'm Rocky Road because my life's all drama, just whatever, but that's a terrible example because that's probably the worst icebreaker known to man. Like, another one would be like, what was your first car, or where was your first kiss, or, whatever. But people, I think they can't resist questions like that. It's irresistible. Plus, if you do it on a Monday or a Friday, that's prime procrastination time because nobody wants to be working on Fridays or Mondays. And so they will take all the time in the world to answer those questions. And then what you have is a post with lots of engagement, which then rises to the top. And then your other posts will be ripe with engagement as well. And so that's kind of how, it's not just how you build engagement, but it's how you build a community of engaged people, is to get them to talk to you and themselves and one another. And then before you know it, every post is at the top of their feed because you have so much, and then also I think that my promotion, if you have one post that you allow people to promote one time a week, that's another post that rises right to the top because it's got 200 comments, which I actually hate that post in my group. I hate that we allow people to do because it's like the one post everyone posts on. It's like, do you really think you're getting your listeners by telling podcasters your podcast? That's silly. But they do it. And I think that the post rises to the top. And then I think, the other stuff comes in right after it. So
yeah. So we talked a little bit about monetization. So this is the last of our best ways too. But you have a bit of experience in the sponsorship side to it. So I'd love for you to comment on what are some of the best ways to make your show monetization, worthy.
Worthy?
Yeah, for sponsors and advertisers.
The one thing sponsors and advertisers are looking for, there's literally one thing, your audience. But it doesn't necessarily have to be on your podcast. If you have an audience anywhere, a healthy audience, or even the exact right audience, that's what they want. They will, if it's 200 lawyers and they have some kind of lawyer product, it does not matter how many lawyers there are. It doesn't have to be 10,000 lawyers. That would be a miracle. But most likely it's going to be 400. But if that's the exact right thing, they'll go right after it. So if you sell Chicago Cubs hats, you got to find those Cubs podcasts. Even if there's 300 people, it's worth advertising that $100 a month. It's going to be cheap, right? And you'll get in front of the exact people that want your thing. So I think as a podcaster, just growing your community as much as possible everywhere that you can. Like Elsie and I have 750 to 1,000 listeners a week, but we have 13,000 people in that Facebook group. We have, like you said, a Twitter following of combined like 50,000. And it's because we're engaging on all these places because I can sell advertising in the group and on the show. People want to buy $250 a spot on the show. What they really want is a tweet or a post somewhere else, and we just kind of add it all together. And you can do that too, as long as you have an audience. But people who start a show thinking they have a brilliant idea, where are my sponsors? Well, they don't give a about your idea. No offense. They want the people to listen to it, right?
Right.
Your idea could be, you could be Einstein. It won't matter. If Einstein was standing alone with no lecture, who would know he's brilliant? Who cares? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you think that, from a sponsorship and advertiser standpoint, it's really underestimated podcast advertising?
Totally underestimated. Yes. I think they are missing the boat on so many levels because they are looking for like the broadest reach. And I mean, Home Depot can have the broadest reach. That's fine. But I also think that podcasters are waiting for those big sponsors. They want Casper Mattress and HelloFresh, and they're missing the boat too, because the guy who does a fishing podcast, he doesn't need those sponsors. He needs the guy who's selling tackle boxes. That's right. The guy, but I think we want what the networks have, and that's not even a similar product even.
No, I mean, we see upwards of, that's why we built the Monetize platform the way that we did, so that we could help those 98% monetize their show through their own stuff. Right. God, yeah. And so, we built it that way because we saw like upwards of 30 to 37% conversion rates on the shows that we were already managing for other people. And we were like, this is ridiculous. Why aren't you doing more of this?
Right.
We didn't just make a few $100. We used to make thousands on our 3D print show because the audience was so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can do that deep in a niche.
Yes. In fact, that's the best place to be. You just have to be smart about who you pitch and how you pitch yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some things that, really people shouldn't podcast? Like maybe there's advice, like, how do I know if I should podcast or I shouldn't? Am I not right for this?
I think you're not right for it if the whole point of doing it is because you think it's going to either make you famous or make you money in the next couple of months. And you're not really into the topic, but you know that business podcasts are popular or true crime is popular. If you don't give a crap about either business or true crime, that is going to go south in the worst way possible. And I think anytime you're chasing money or fame, it's never a good way to make either one of those things. Like you can't want fame and have it. You either have to you just have to be great at what you're doing and love what you're doing. And I think those are the people that are successful in really any genre, but it's never more true than in podcasting. The law of attraction is strong with this field because if you are after money and you are desperate, your listeners will smell it and they will run. It's only when you really care about your topic and you're really interested or you're having a good time, that makes the best audio, that makes advertisers flock to you, that makes listeners flock to you, then you're successful. But if you if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you just may as well give up now. Just go do something else that makes you happy as a hobby or a career, because this is not really a career. It's like something fun that turns into a career when you're good.
Right, right. Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that advice. So the last thing I want to know is, you mentioned your kids.
I have.
Have they listened to the show? Do they like that you're a podcaster? Are they proud of you for that? Or they're like, I don't want to know anything about it. What my mom does is weird.
So my 5-year-old he doesn't even know anything exists other than himself. I have a 5-year-old and a 21-year-old. My 21-year-old, I know, has never listened to, I have 2 shows, almost 3. He's never listened to any of them, but he did come with me to the NSA conference. And he was actually like kind of excited. Like, he hung out with not just me, but other podcasters too. And they were talking about it. And like, first of all, he's a good public speaker and he's very passionate about certain things. Like, I think he would make a very good podcaster. And he's kind of been like hemming and hawing about college and, travel. And like, he doesn't know what he wants to do with himself. And I was like, well, but you never shut up about Pokemon. Like, I don't see a lot of Pokemon podcasts. Like, maybe you should just talk about that and see where it takes you. Like, at the very least, he'll have somewhat of a built-in audience, in the sense that like a lot of podcasters know me and they'll support him or tell people about it if I say so, which is, lucky enough. Like, and really that's anybody with a podcast. If you have a kid who's doing something, you can just tell your audience, hey, check this out. My kid's doing it. So I think he might be getting into it, but it's certainly not from listening to me. I doubt he will ever listen to my show. I really do. I just don't think.
So I have daughters.
Okay.
My 24-year-old runs our business. So if most of our clients
God,
know
awesome.
her better than they know me.
That's amazing.
So obviously
that.
she does listen. She does know what goes on there. But my 10 and my 5-year-old, they all want to get on the mic. Like, it's fascinating to them that we have microphones in the office and they want to get on and hear their own voice. And I think I can't be prouder of I mean, that's like the idea that those girls will never know what it's like to not vocalize. Like, to me, like to me, I was like, I'm done. I did a great job as mom. Good. I could slack off for the rest of the years. No, no,
he's very much a ham as well. And I do love when he loves to talk on the microphone. He loves the sound of his own voice. He sings a lot. Like, I do love that. Like, I don't know that I could instill that in Nate, because he's just a little goofy anyway. But yeah, I do love that Isaac likes to play with the mic and he likes hearing himself. And I think he's a natural podcaster. I just don't know I can't always capture when he's being hilarious. It's so spontaneous.
I know. It's like, if I sat you down to speak, you wouldn't do it, right?
I didn't expect him to follow my footsteps in the next 5 years.
I just attach a microphone to you. We'll follow you around. It'll be a different model.
Like, your 10-year-old could do her own show already.
Yeah, she's still trying to figure out what she wants to do, but she wants to be on video. So she
got
wants
it.
to be a YouTuber. Like, that's her goal.
And
so I was like, look, you just got to figure this out. We're here to support you. We got lots of tech. My son-in-law is a video guy. I'm like, you've got support here. You can do this, but you got to figure out what you're going to talk about, because I'm not going to let you just go into it and go like, I'm going to talk unicorns, and then you talk 3 shows and you've got nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, you do kind of have to put some thought into that, don't you?
And so that's it. Yeah. So that's the part that's hung her up. And I'm so glad, because I wish more podcasters would have that kind of processing.
Yeah, totally.
Let's think about can we talk about this for a long time? Do people really want to hear this? And,
she's really lucky she has you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So yours are too. So I am so excited about our community. So let's just do a final, tell everyone about when the event is, all the details about it. And we will make sure that this is fully in the blog post. There's a blog post for every single episode we create. And so all the details will be there. So if you're listening in your car or at the gym, you don't have to write this down, but I want Jessica to tell it to you. So you can hear it, how excited she is about it, because I'm excited.
I am excited. So you can find out about the event at ShePodcastsLive.com. It's going to be in Atlanta at the Marriott Marquis, which is a gorgeous hotel.
Beautiful hotel.
So excited. It's October 11th through the 13th. The kickoff party is on the 10th. It's going to have amazing podcasters and speakers. Like I said, 107 beautiful women to teach you every aspect of podcasting, including how to start if you've never started before. If you want to learn more about ShePodcasts, the free group, you can go to ShePodcasts.com. All of our handles are ShePodcasts at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at ShePodcasts. Our group is Facebook.com/groups/ShePodcasts. So please join if you want to find out what it's all about. It's just going to be an in-person version of the online version. And it's, like I said, really encouraging and supportive and loving. And I can't wait to meet you in person since you've never been to another podcast.
I know.
I hope we live up to the hype.
I am absolutely sure you will.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today too. It's been really fun talking.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. And all of you out there, I'm doing Center of Influence interviews with top podcasters all over, and I'm bringing you many more from the event. So the ShePodcast live event, I've got more speakers coming up in the next, in probably the next 3 weeks. So we'll all leading up to the event. I've got probably at least one a week who will be coming out who's going to be a speaker. So we're doing a whole bunch of awesome highlights for the next couple of months. And I'm
send me those so I can help put them out there.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to tag you when we post them. So yeah. So, and if you didn't catch it, because Erica Corday went ahead of Jessica here. So Erica Corday's went live. So she's also going to be a speaker at the event, and we're super excited about her. So don't miss that episode. So we'll be sure to make a throwback to that. So Jessica Kupferman, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. ShePodcast Live coming up. Thank you all for listening to Feed Your Brand Center of Influence. I'm Tracy Hazard, and we'll be back next time with a top influencer.
Toot toot.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.